Yo, welcome to the Runway show. I'm Nick. I'm filling in for Maddie today to host this today. I'm joined with Craig and Jeff. I'm excited to talk to you guys, get to know you guys a little bit more. You guys want to introduce yourself a little bit first?
Yeah, I'm Craig Shapiro. I am living down in Naples now for 3.5 years, formerly in New York. I work in the financial industry. I work for a firm called the Bear Traps Report. We provide financial research to institutions and to family offices and financial advisors and the like. And so I do a lot of macro research and very heavily involved in Bitcoin.
Awesome. What about yourself, Jeff?
My name's Jeff Chirino, and I'm originally from Naples. So I am just a fan of Bitcoin blockchain and anything Web3.
Awesome. Awesome. Likewise, I'm excited to talk to you guys about this today. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. We're going to touch on some of the current events. Is there anything that you guys want to start off with just to get started?
No, nothing in particular. I mean, it's been quiet, right? I mean, with this new administration, it's just no news, no headlines, nothing to worry about. Everyone sleeps well, and it's all good, right?
Yeah, it's we have a president that can't talk any right now, so it's no new material to talk about.
Absolutely.
Speaking of the president, you guys able to watch speech last night?
I did.
Yeah.
I watched about, I'd say, the first hour and 15 minutes of the hour and 45-minute ordeal. I think I fell asleep for the last half hour or so. It was entertaining. It was interesting.
Yep.
He had a lot to say. Democrats had nothing to applaud, appreciate, but
They appreciated one thing last night. Do you remember what that was?
I didn't get a chance to watch.
I don't know.
So last night, the only thing they applauded for was the Ukrainian funding, and they were talking about the funding and all this going, and that's the only thing they clapped about. And Trump was like, "What? You want to do it another 5 years?" And then he called Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas to her face, and that was just classic Trump. But
Yeah.
it's a lot. A lot has changed over the last couple weeks with the new administration. But I think it's for the better. I think it's better for our industry in terms of Bitcoin, in terms of the whole economic as a whole. But what are your thoughts being in the macro space and your experience?
Yeah. Well, first off, specifically on last night, I think I think it was a bad look for the Democrats to be as stoic, as adversarial as you know. I don't know, every other adjective that comes to mind. It's just it's just Democrats are polling so poorly, and a lot of the things that Trump talks about are there are some unifying issues that and so to not applaud anything.
Yeah.
I think it was a bad look, and I think a missed opportunity, for them. So it's no surprise that Democrats in Congress poll so poorly, and the Democratic Party lacks leadership, and I think it's a real problem for them. Now, with respect to Trump, I think what we're seeing now, the markets have become a little bit choppier over the course of the last couple of weeks. When I spoke at the Bitcoin conference in Naples in January, I talked about this idea that the euphoria around Trump being elected and Republicans controlling the House and Senate led to an environment of strong asset prices to end the year, growth expectations that were rising, Bitcoin, to the moon.
Yep.
Everything was great. And the issue with that euphoria is that euphoria was priced in to a large degree. And my concern was that as he came into office, the reality of some of his ideas, which are short-term pain for long-term gain in nature, were going to be a problem and more difficult for the markets to digest. And so if you think about tariffs, if you think about deportations, you think about cutting the budget deficit and retrenching government spending, these are anti-growth priorities and platforms. And the good things that people want to see on tax cuts, on immigration reform, on supply side reform, on energy production, deregulation, these are things that are long-term going to be great for the private sector and the economy. And so how do we transition from the bad stuff to the good stuff? And so at the beginning, all the good stuff was priced in and none of the bad stuff. And now I think the reality is some of the bad stuff is creating this uncertainty in the economy from businesses who are having difficulty planning when they don't know the tariff regime. And for consumers who are struggling with high prices, and maybe concerns about their future employment outlook are starting to retrench spending. And so this uncertainty is starting to get picked up in the economy now, and asset prices are noticing. Stocks are starting to get hit a bit. Bitcoin has gotten hit a bit. The bond market has been rallying as people are getting more, flight to safety. Gold's been doing incredibly well. So we're transitioning here, and the question is, when are we going to get clarity? When are we going to get certainty from the administration about the tariff policy, about the budget, about the tax cuts, about the spending cuts? What's it going to look like? It doesn't appear like we're going to get that clarity this month, probably not next month when the tariffs kick off in April. But hopefully, we get it soon enough where business can say, okay, we understand the rules of engagement here. It's time for us to go to work. Trump's obviously made, massive announcements of companies spending money to invest in America, whether it's Apple or TSM or Oracle and OpenAI and Honda and spending in his mind trillions of dollars of capex that come into America. That's all great from a long-term perspective, but the path there is going to be arduous, and I am concerned about the near-term outlook for all asset prices right now, navigating this uncertainty.
Yeah, it's definitely, with everything, as you just said, Craig, that's a great observation. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't think we're just going up and to the right. I think it's going to be a choppy go down, asset prices get repriced, feel what's going to happen with the market, see how to react, and just kind of really understand what's happening and the framework to how to proceed. But on the way to get there, there's going to be pain, but you can work through that pain and grow as a whole economy at the end. What are your thoughts on that, Jeff? I know you didn't watch anything last night, but just hearing what Craig just mentioned, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, clarity. I'm looking forward to a lot of regulations. A lot of regulations come through, and more clarity before I really have an opinion on what's going on. Because without that, anything's possible. Everything's just a theory, and yeah, I really don't.
Yeah. So I believe tariffs are, like, my perspective is tariffs are a good, at the end of the day, they're a good thing. Not because we want to implement them against like we want them to actually be like take hold, but more so what it brings people to the table and makes things happen. I don't think we're gonna tariff everyone and things just stay the same, but I think people are gonna, like we saw like with the Colombian president. We're not gonna allow your people to come here on the airplane. And then he said, all right, we're gonna hit you with a tariff. And then the next day, he now takes the people back on the plane. So I think it's a way to get people to the table. I might be wrong. I don't have as much experience as some people, but that's my perspective on it. But yeah, along the way, I believe that we're gonna see a lot of, like, especially with Bitcoin, it's the most volatile, tradable in the entire world. I think what does Michael Saylor say? Volatility is vitality. So I think that's actually a good sign that the market's reacting. And over time, with the supply being a fixed issuance, I think it's, the price is going to go up over time, but it's not just going to always be going up.
Yeah. Luke Gromen refers to Bitcoin as the last functioning smoke alarm, which I think is a great way to think about it. And so when you're concerned about the outlook, or, there's uncertainty, liquidity is drying up, and it's Saturday, you're like, I got to do something. I'm concerned for geopolitical reasons. I'm concerned about what Trump's tweeting. I'm concerned about anything. I lost my job on Friday, whatever it is. You can transact in Bitcoin 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, no matter what. And so it becomes an outlet for anybody to do anything at any point in time, which makes it more volatile, and it makes it an outlet to express concern and fear. And so Bitcoin often acts as a leading indicator for risk asset prices on the way up and on the way down. And so, kind of topping out in January, like it did, I don't think is, too much of a surprise. And look, I think it's going to continue to be this choppy trading environment here for Bitcoin, for stocks, for all asset prices. And as we, to your point, we just don't know.
Yep.
And we can scenario analyze everything. But what I do know is that Trump was elected on an agenda, to do a couple things. One was to bring down inflation, lower the cost of living for Main Street, improve affordability. He was elected to reduce the size of government, the federal government specifically,
Yep.
Reduce the deficits. And he was elected to restructure trade and bring back manufacturing jobs to America. I think we were significantly exposed as a country during COVID. Supply chain being disruptive for common goods like toilet paper and paper towels and soap and all sorts of things. And so I think the administration and the Department of Defense kind of realizes that we need to make things here. We need to build things here, and we need to have manufacturing capabilities here.
Yeah.
And so the way to transition us to that kind of economy again is to protect domestic manufacturing and to encourage investment in America. And because it's a higher cost place to do business versus the rest of the world, because labor costs are higher, we need to put up tariffs and prevent either our own companies from investing abroad and bringing the product back, because that doesn't do anything for our jobs, or prevent other companies from other countries just dumping product here. And so tariffs are a tool to help rebalance that trade and that kind of society that we want over time. Will there be inflationary pressures on certain goods in the near term? Absolutely. And that's the short-term pain for long-term gain type thing. And the issue that I think the administration has is, the media continues to press about, cost, this study says the average, family is going to see an $1,800 a year, rise in their cost of living because of this. What do you think? And it's hard to message why this is good when long term, when people feel the short term.
Yeah.
And so, but I think it's an essential tool.
Yeah, well, to kind of share my personal experience when it comes to tariffs, I've been in sales for over 15 years, and the last job that I had actually came to the United States from Germany. It was a tech company, and they were incentivized by the tariffs changing the first time around. So it does create, if we keep an eye out on the, on the on the jobs out there that are hiring, that's something you can kind of follow and see what kind of companies are coming in, and they're going to start hiring for different reasons due to the tariffs. And then to touch on what you were talking about, like the supply chain, to kind of backtrack a little bit and just speak in general, something I'm passionate about is blockchain, which is what Bitcoin is built on. I like the idea of supply chain on blockchain, and I hope to see some of that, in the future as well, and get integrated with more.
Yeah, can you unpack that a little bit more, Jeff?
What do you mean?
Like when you say blockchain, supply chain on blockchain, like what do you mean? Like how will that like how do you see that happening? And what is the benefit of that?
Well, the benefit of it is that you have you're taking away the intermediary of the process, of the supply chain process. It's being used right now by a lot of really big companies to kind of keep track of the supply chain, like Pfizer, Kroger, Walmart, Home Depot, Renault. They're all using supply chain for different reasons. They're using it alongside with like IoT, the Internet of Things sensors, where Pfizer's keeping from the initial, from taking material out of the ground to the whole process. If it drops below a certain temperature, it's automatically recorded on the blockchain. And it's they're not using public or decentralized blockchain; they're using private blockchains.
Yep.
So along with like the decentralized blockchain that we love, there's also private and distributed. So I think each one of those have a really good use case for whatever reasons, whether you want to stay private or if you want to, the world, create this new open market where anyone and everyone's invited to this. I think we're going to see things that we can't wrap our head around right now because it doesn't exist. So with this technology, I think we're going to start to see some of this stuff happening.
Yeah. One of the things like being in Bitcoin for some time that that everyone always thinks that Bitcoin is like the first blockchain, but they don't realize the blockchain technology has been around for like forever.
Distributed ledger technology.
Yeah.
It's been around, since the late 80s, I believe, early 90s, maybe sooner. I don't know from what I've come across.
That's one of the things that like always aggravates me when someone, it's just a blockchain technology. It's like, no, that's a part of Bitcoin, but that's not all Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is decentralized. It uses blockchain, but also uses a bunch of different. I think the beauty of Bitcoin is that it brought a bunch of different inventions and made it into one, like the proof of work, the running your own node, decentralized blockchain, and anybody can run the software, and it's the most diverse software like spread around the entire world. It's really astonishing, and we can talk all day today about Bitcoin, and I'd be happy to do that. But before we get into just Bitcoin content only, Paul, why don't you share with us something you want to start? Give us a topic.
Most definitely. So there was an interesting post by Jamaat Palapatia. Did I say that right? love you, Chamath. That was touching on
Yeah,
this
so
overall.
I'll read it here for you. The big gobs of money in the world are speaking pretty loudly right now. The US market is safe and our money will be there. If UK and Europe want to support an ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia, they can borrow from us to do so, but they will have to pay for it via higher interest rates. This, more than anything else, may swiftly end the war. Simply, the United Kingdom and Europe cannot afford to borrow like this, no matter their political philosophy.
Well, I like Chamath as well.
He's the one from All In podcast,
yeah.
right? All right.
And he's actually promoted a couple of my tweets lately, so I appreciate
Shout out
all
to
the,
Chamath.
all the love and support there. Look, I think there's a lot in here. I mean, what we do know is that the U.S. has spent, I think it's in order upwards of $8 trillion on, global defense. So, since, for the last, 25 years, maybe since 2001, and we borrowed tons and tons of money in order to do that. We haven't really gotten a lot of return on that investment. And so I think what the Trump administration, or Trump specifically, is trying to do is say, hey, we've spent a lot of money on this kind of stuff and we didn't get a payback. And so you're either going to start paying us back now, or you're going to go do this yourself, because we can't. He doesn't necessarily say this, but we can't afford to keep doing this anymore. We can't afford to be the policeman of the world. We can't afford to be sending money and weapons to every, and troops to every region of the world that has conflict. And so,
because who are we to decide what's good and what's bad for everyone in the world? We're America.
Yeah. And look, I think he would, some people would say, well, democracy and everything, and so we should spearhead that. But the truth is, we can't afford it, right?
Yep.
I mean, we're too much in debt, 36 trillion of debt, 125% of GDP, 2 trillion a year in budget deficits, and so we're at the point where we can't afford it. Now, the issue with that Chamath tweet, or one of them, is that if you look at every one of those countries on there, except maybe the UK, their interest rates are actually lower than ours.
Mm-hmm.
So, when he says they're going to pay up for it. Now, the rates were up today because there was news that Germany is going to spend 500 billion euros over the next 10 years on defense spending. And so, and they're going to basically, I don't know if the word's violate, but, traditionally in European countries have had an inability to deficit spend based on the treaty in the euro. And so Germany's basically saying, now we're going to pass a domestic law that allows us to overspend versus our budget in order to spend for military purposes. And the expectation is that the rest of Europe is going to have to rearm, as well as the U.S. pulls back from its obligations abroad, possibly pulls back from NATO. We'll see. And so, yeah, it's going to be more expensive for Europe to buy their own weapons, rearm themselves, pay up for that kind of spending. They're going to have to deficit spend and borrow money like the U.S. has been doing for the last, forever. So, but one of the pushbacks on that narrative is these foreign countries own a lot of U.S. assets based on their excess trade that they've been doing for a long period of time, not just in Europe, but clearly China as well, Japan. And so as these countries focus on their domestic economies, domestic infrastructure, consumption in China, defense, in order to help fund some of that, the money's going to come out of the U.S. The money is going to flee U.S. assets in order to support that kind of investment. Those investors who are going to be buying the bonds from Germany have to have the money. They have their money in the U.S. markets, either in U.S. treasuries or U.S. stocks or whatever. And so there's going to be a flow of capital that leaves the U.S. Now, that's going to weaken the dollar. And that's a good thing. That's something that I think the administration wants to see over time. Can I stop
you right there? Because I've heard that the term weaken the dollar. And to me, it's like, why would we want a weaker dollar? And I know a lot of other people that felt the same way, even though I understand the long term. But why do we want a weaker dollar?
The cost of production in America versus most of the countries in the rest of the world is too expensive in order to make products and export them profitably. And so one of the ways to kind of improve our competitiveness globally is a currency that is weaker, such that countries abroad looking to buy our products have stronger currencies. They could pay up more for our products. And so, yeah, I think the strong dollar policy has been with us for forever. But when we have these massive trade deficits and we're trying to restructure and manufacture at home, we need a weaker currency in order to be competitive. And so that's the dynamic that I think the administration is trying to create. But as these countries start to sell their U.S. dollar assets and our currency weakens, we may find ourselves in a situation where our markets are not doing well. Our stock market is down. Our bond market actually gets sold off, and so interest rates move higher. And so we'll see how this all plays out. But I think fundamentally the message is the U.S. can't afford to police the world anymore.
Yeah.
The U.S. can't afford to spend $1 trillion a year in military on to help Europe fight Russia or whoever, whatever else we want to do. And so Trump is shaking the table. He's basically saying we're not doing this anymore. Whereas Trump 1.0 tried to do this a little bit, wasn't as successful. Clearly, Democratic administrations and previous Republican administrations were unable to do any of this.
Yep.
And so he's shaking the table in a lot of ways, and he's doing it in a way that people are just not comfortable with, right? I mean, the conversation with Zelensky in the Oval, I think, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
You think so?
Because that's from a decorum point of view,
Yeah.
right? This is not how we're supposed to act. This is not how we're supposed to negotiate in public. But this is Trump saying, no, this is how I do things here. And we're trying to do things differently.
And if we want something to get done,
Right.
doing it the way we've been doing it hasn't been working. So if nothing changes, nothing changes. Like I thought that interaction was something that was amazing for people to be able to see, even if it did ruffle some feathers. They could see that the grift that was good, that's been going on, that someone's just coming and taking not taking, but we're giving and giving and giving so much. But what are we really getting back in return? Like, how is America benefiting from this? And I really enjoyed watching that and seeing him not put him in his place, but at the same time, like, look, we're the reason. Like, without us, where are you right now? And you guys are taking advantage of that, and you're just continuing coming back and coming back and coming back for more. But when enough is enough.
Yeah, I think it was the old guard, right? The media was offended. The deep state was offended.
All the right people were offended.
The people exactly. And so I think Trump says, no, this is how we're doing things. This is how I negotiate, and this is how I impress that we're running an America first and largely an America only policy. And if you want to have access to American technology, American consumer, American laws, like, you better be with us. Otherwise, you're against us. And the way to do that is to bring down your tariffs. The way to do that is to invest in America. The way to do that is, when I say it's time to you to spend money in defense, then you go do it. And we're carrying the big stick now. And time will tell if we are still as powerful as Trump and others think we are, or if we've lost some of that power to China, to Russia over time, because of the deficits and because of the budget issues and the debt situation. And that's going to be playing out here. It's going to be fascinating to watch over the next several quarters.
Yeah, the debt situation, to me, it's very intriguing because there really is no way out of the debt. Like, it's going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, that's my belief, because just how the dollar, we have a Fed that continues to print more and more and more dollars, and everything is inflationary, and over time everything's going to get more expensive. So it's interesting to see how we're going to get to that point. And hopefully but I think we have lost throughout the last 20, 30 years that America was built on building stuff. Like, if you look at the greatest Americans, we built so much, and we basically forced other countries to build, and we just get, because of everything you just said. So it's pretty fascinating to me. What are your thoughts on this, Jeff?
Oh boy, when it comes to what, building?
Just in general, everything that we're talking about right now.
Again, it's hard to say. I think just watching things unfold. I think one thing you had mentioned is, what does the U.S. get out of it, doing all this, giving the money or providing, other countries with things? What do we get in return? I think what we get in return is being the big guy, the guy that they look up to, the person with the biggest stick, the one with that makes the rules, that says what goes, and leads the world in the direction that it needs to go, essentially.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's look, we're living in a more bifurcated world. There's a little bit of an us versus them type dynamic that's being developed. I don't think it's in a warring type way. It's more of a the U.S. has been the reserve currency issuer. It's been forced to take on these trade deficits. It's been forced to hollow out its manufacturing capabilities, which has led to, a hollowed out middle class and a growing segment of the population that finds itself in the lower part of the K-shaped economy. And Trump is basically saying that game is up. Like, we can't go down that path anymore. And I was elected on a Main Street over Wall Street type of policy, and I know he's not necessarily the guy you would expect to be the author of that type of philosophy. He's a New York real estate billionaire, and so to hear me say, "Oh, he's speaking for the common man," it's a little bit bizarre.
Yeah.
And because he surrounds himself with billionaires like Elon Musk or Lutnick or Scott Bessent in Treasury, the message gets maybe a little bit jaded. But the policies are for the working are for the working class. The policies are to protect the border, to recreate jobs in America, to bring down the cost of living, to grow the skills base of the country, to invest locally, in areas that are high growth, artificial intelligence, alternative fuels, and robotics, and kind of the technology of the future. And so
it's funny to find, like, Trump is, I don't know if he is, but one of the oldest presidents we ever had, even though he lives a lot younger than Biden. But it's funny that he's the president that's wants to take the new tech to the next level. I mean, it really is embracing new technology. Like, my father does not understand technology at all, and he's like completely lost. To see someone of Trump's age try to like really understand the benefit of technology and try to continue to push that forward, because if we are the innovators of the technology, we can continue being the biggest power in the world. So I think it's really fascinating to see that he's really adapting and adopting these technologies. And yeah, he's surrounded by Elon Musk, he's a builder. Like, it's not like he's just a billionaire that's just like not trying to build anything. Elon Musk is consistently pushing the envelope, trying to like continue this human like population and growth. So it's really cool. I'm very fascinated by like the partnership between Elon Musk, Trump, Howard Lutnick, and his entire cabinet. I think they're very strong picks for America as a whole. Even though there's a little tribulation and along the way, I think in the long run, it's going to be something that's going to benefit America. And we're going to look back on this time like, wow, this was actually a really big turning point, fork in the road moment. And I'm very glad, and I hope most people are going to be very glad that we did go this way.
Yeah. No, and I think he wants to look. I mean, I think it's been clear he's trying to win a Nobel Prize as well, right? He's trying to create peace, in our time. He's trying to create broker a deal between Russia and the Ukraine. He's trying to broker further Mideast peace. I would imagine he's trying to convince China not to invade Taiwan. I mean, I think he sees himself more as a pacifist, but obviously will use military force if necessary, and so he kind of acts or speaks erratically, and so he's tried to keep our adversaries off guard. Like, he may do something crazy if you kind of rub him the wrong way, but I don't think he's trying to kind of drum up war globally.
Yeah.
But I do think he is cognizant that not everyone is going to believe in this vision where America still acts as a leader. And if you don't believe it, that's cool. Go hang out with China. If China and Russia want to have their deal, and there's other parts of the global South that want to be part of a system that's away from capitalism, that's more communal, that's then that's great. But we're doing things our way. It's America first, because for too long, too many people in this country have been given a raw deal based on global trade and the Davos mentality, and those days are over.
Yeah, I think it's important as an American that we have a president that wants Americans to benefit first and not last, and he's putting our needs first. So I think that should be a priority for a president of any country. You should put your citizens' needs before anyone else's. You should make sure your borders are safe before you worry about someone else's borders on the other side of the world, and making that the forefront. And that's pretty much like one of the biggest things that he got elected on was stopping the illegal immigration, protecting our border. I don't understand the other side of the other perspective. Like, we should let illegal immigrant. It's never made sense to me, and I might be wrong, but to me, it never made any sense. But what do I know? All right, Paul, what we got here?
Yeah, let's get into it. So we've got an interesting post here discussing the macro picture of these measures that are being taken by the Trump administration regarding, the cutting of reckless spending and addressing our national deficit. So it's quite a long tweet, but I'll pull it up for you if you just want to skim over it and give your commentary. Essentially, it's discussing this chart here that highlights that the Treasury has some 7 trillion of debt to refinance in 2025, just as bond yields are marching higher again. And Craig, you've probably seen this, but essentially, this is a take.
Yeah. I mean, basically, what some are suggesting is that this is all that the administration is really trying to purposely engineer a market correction, a slowdown in the economy, in order to refinance our debts at much lower levels of interest. Because if we have a slowdown and we're able to bring down inflation, that will force the Fed to cut rates, and so and that we're purposely trying to crash that they're purposely trying to crash
So we
things.
can get the rates lower.
Yeah, and so look, I think there's convenience in that argument. I think this is actually the right thing to do. I think asset prices are largely overvalued, and the reason that's important is because the wealth effect is creating an environment where inflation is too high, cost of living is too high because too many rich people own too many things and can spend money very easily, and so inflation's never coming down. And so more and more people are getting screwed by high prices, and the affordability crisis in America is a real thing. And so if you get asset prices down by engineering a correction, that wealth effect gets hit. The ability of the rich to spend money gets hit. And so you're kind of bringing down the 1 or 5% down to the rest of the society. Normally you'd think about, bringing up everybody to where the rich people are, but
That's how
frankly,
we got to this point.
that's how we are. That's how we got to this point. That's how we've gotten to record inequality, in this country. So,
And Trump being a billionaire, that's how he got to where he got. So it's really like if he wasn't the president right now, he's literally attacking his own kind.
yeah.
And that takes a lot of and everyone says he has such a big ego, but he's really like attacking himself in a way, saying, you know what, like I am a product of this and I've benefited extremely from this. And the only way to correct is to kind of go against what made me who I am today. And he took a look in the mirror and said, you know what, I want to work for the middle Americans, not just the elite. And everyone says, oh, he's only for the big, 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 big billionaires. And it really couldn't be more opposite.
Yeah. Look, I think in the first term, he was elected on this idea. And the first thing he really did was he enacted a tax cut for billionaires, and other people too, but billionaires, and rich people really made out. And I think a lot of people in the cabinet were deep state type folks, and he got bad advice,
Definitely.
and so he wasn't really able. And then by 2018, he had completely lost power because the Democrats steamrolled him.
Yep.
And so he basically had less than 2 years to kind of do anything, and then 2 years he was impeached twice. And so this time around, I think that message that got him elected the first time is resonating, and he has the right people now in place to actually implement that strategy.
Yep.
And so, look, the plan is you have to bring down inflation. And if you bring down inflation, and the way to bring down inflation is through taking asset prices down, and it's also through cutting government spending. But if you cut government spending, the government's 25% of the economy. So if you take government spending down by 10 to 15%, you're going to, that's a 200-300 basis point hit to GDP. I mean, you're basically putting us into a recession because the private sector cannot grow that rapidly at this point in order to make up the difference. So you have to engineer a recession, but doing so will lower inflation, will lower prices, that will lower interest rates. And it's not just the federal funds rate, it's the long-term borrowing rates, the 10-year rate, which is where they're really focused. And the reason that's important is because that's where auto loans are set. That's where home equity, that's where home loans are set. That's where credit card loans are set. If you think about credit cards now versus 2022, I mean, interest rates on credit cards in 2022 were like 14, 15%. They're 25, 26, 28% now. I mean, it's choking an increasing segment of the population that carries credit card balances. You literally cannot get out of the way. And so if we bring down yields across the entire curve, the idea is that banks will then be able to drop those credit card rates because their borrowing costs have gone down. If they want to keep their profits, they can take some of that excess out of those rates, and that's going to help everybody in the economy. But you need to engineer this slowdown first in order to create this. And if they don't create this, and they get afraid of the market correction, let's say they say, you know what, we're not going to cut spending. We're just going to do more tax cuts. We're going to blow the deficit out further. What's going to happen is we're going to get even worse inflation. And I think that's something that would run Trump out of office at this point. If we're talking about inflation in 2026, Republicans are going to lose power in a big way. And so I think the administration really needs to be hyper vigilant to keep prices down without putting in price controls. And in order to, the way to do that is through getting asset prices down sooner, which helps bring down the cost of living. If you think about entitlement spending is tied to inflation. So if they bring inflation down, then entitlements will grow less, which helps the deficit. So it's very circular. It's very reflexive in that regards. There's a lot of benefit to that. I don't think it's Machiavellian, like, hey, let's crash the market, but I think the policies come out would suggest we have a slowdown first. We blame the old administration. We get it out of the way early in the term, and that gives us time to rebuild things private sector driven, with deregulation, with lower energy prices, with improved supply chain, with immigration reform, and that creates a better, more sustainable economy from 2026 and beyond. That keeps Republicans in power for 4 years, 8 years, however many years they want.
Yeah, and what would you say like other side's view on this was and is compared to like what you just summed up? Like, how come there's not like a common like why can't we like they agree on this?
On spending cuts or just
Like the debt, the inflation. Like, why is that such like a
I
political
think
issue?
I think, well, as far as the spending cuts are concerned, I think what we're seeing is there's Republicans are threatening to come after the safety net for an increasing segment of the population, whether it's Medicare expenses, and or Social Security. More and more folks or unemployment insurance, right? That's at the state level. But, if we have government layoffs, more people are going to be put onto the safety net. And if we're cutting them the safety net, what are these people going to do? And so I think there's a fear that the more reduction in government we do, the more we're going to put people out of work. And they don't have the skills necessarily to re-engage in the private sector.
But that almost seems like they took advantage of the system though, and they didn't develop the skills. And they like, if you look at Doge and all the money they've been like cutting, like a lot of this just wasteful spending that the government has been growing, but it's been growing like in a bullshit way.
Yeah.
So like,
yeah, I mean, but there's also been cottage industries that have built around this government largesse, right? And so there's been secondary and tertiary employment in consulting and in and around DC, or even contractors that have benefited from bloated government contracts that hire people and overhire. So there's a follow-on effect there as we start to come after some of that spending that's going to have knock-on effects into the rest of the economy. But look, it has been a bullshit economy for at least the last 5 years, if not even longer. I mean, the growth of government has greatly outpaced the overall growth in the economy. The growth of employment count in government sectors is basically the fastest growing part, had been the fastest growing part of the society. And so, we have layoffs in the private sector all the time during slowdowns. Why is it the case that we can't have layoffs in the government sector?
Yeah.
I mean, we should, especially if there's fraud and abuse and folks who aren't working hard or whatever it is. And so, I think, unfortunately this rubs some people the wrong way, but I mean, this is how you create a more, a more sustainable, stronger society, right?
It's almost like if you're thinking about like people trading and like trading on leverage, it's like we're taking all the leverage out. And when you take the leverage out, the price dips for a little bit and then it goes and it finds its bottom. And then the leverage is all out, then we can build from the bottom on a stronger foundation again.
That's right. And I think as long as we don't re-leverage immediately after finding that bottom, we'll be okay. And I think what people who own assets right now are thinking is that, well, the minute we have his correction, Trump's going to he's going to cave, right? He's not going to do the tariffs. He's not going to cut the spending. He's going to push the deficits. He's going to push the tax cuts. And so I don't need to sell my assets because we're just going to go back into, it's just going to be like it's always been. Inflation is going to be higher, but whatever. The only way to really get out of this debt mess is through inflation. And so why would I ever sell? Why would I ever get out of my assets? And look, I think it's possible that may be how this goes out. And we'll be talking about 4 and 5 and 6% inflation next year. And then the average consumer will really be in having a problem. So
I personally think that's inevitable no matter what. Like no matter who's in office or anything, I feel like the debt's going to continue to grow. It's built in. It has we're just in a debt loop where it's the interest on the debt is just so extreme that we can't ever get out of debt. Now, one thing that I find interesting is if America does adopt a Bitcoin reserve, if that does take place and they do what Cynthia Lummis has been proposing, where they buy Bitcoin consistently, and as Bitcoin's price appreciates, and we can use that, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we've spent say $1 trillion on Bitcoin, but now Bitcoin's tripled, so now it's worth so it starts cutting at the deficit in terms of an asset that America holds on its balance sheet. So I'm really interested to see how that's going to play out in the long term. Hopefully we get that reserve. We don't need the reserve in terms of Bitcoin does not need the reserve, but America needs Bitcoin.
Yeah. So there's an interesting take from Eric here that I'll pull up that just kind of touches on this, pretty much saying that if the government spending were to be reduced, which hasn't happened since 1946, then inevitably GDP will fall, right? Every Democrat and half of Republicans will wail about the economic contraction, but nothing healthier could happen. Essentially, it's like removing cancer, right? And that never feels good. Someone commented underneath saying, when it's in your brain and they remove it by amputating at the neck, right? So Eric was saying we probably agree that it cannot actually be removed, which is an interesting point. We are so deep that there's going to have to be some significant changes made, and I think the reason it's so politicized is something that Elon was talking about on Rogan, how essentially the left has been buying voters, and with all of these, um, you know, health programs and different, different agencies, essentially fast tracking citizenship through, these NGOs. There's an incentive there, to continue the spending, and the adult in the room is suddenly the extremist for simply trying to reduce that. But I think the outcome was a one party state. I don't know if you agree with that, Greg, but that's sort of what I got my takeaway from Elon's conversation with Joe.
Yeah, I mean the tolerance for pain is, I would say, correlated to the polling, right, and the popularity of the policies. So right now, more, 75% of Americans thought Trump did a great job last night, according to Trump's poll this morning, which I heard from the, that they like to State of the Union. But broadly speaking, there's still 2/3 of folks, maybe even more, are supportive of what Doge is doing and trying to root out corruption and grift and, reduce the size of government. And so as long as that's the case, and as long as there's popular support for these policies, I think the pain tolerance is higher, right? I mean, they'll keep going in doing this because even if we can't eliminate, all the cancer, we should at least try to eliminate some of it and give us, longer time to basically find a cure, right? And so that's what we're doing here now. The issue will be when folks start to give up, maybe give up hope on it, or Trump starts to do other things that annoy them, or they start to lose their jobs because of all this uncertainty, and then the polling starts to go the other way
because it affects them
personally. How much tolerance then will the administration have to keep pushing this, as opposed to the alternative, which is always easier, which is just inflate, which is just print more money. And time will tell. I don't really know. I suspect that right now the pain tolerance is high. I think that the administration would be very comfortable seeing, a slowdown, seeing asset prices fall 15, 20, 25%, which is really only where they were back last summer, right? So I mean, it's not. I mean, people think that's like a heroic correction. It's like we're just going back to where we were less than a year ago. I mean, but it would be a lot of pain for people who are levered up, right? Who have taken these equity market gains and bought another car or another house or whatever, kept their spending up.
Yeah, they took on more bad debt instead of investing in
Right.
good debt and things that are going to build value. They took that money to take on liability.
Right. And so that's what I think that, that's where the rubber hit the road. When the polling starts to go the wrong way, I think that's when you can expect Trump to pivot away from this. But hopefully between now and then, they've cut out a lot of spending. They've actually made a dent in the debt to GDP ratio. Yeah, they're not going to get it. We're never going to balance the budget. I know Trump's talking about it, and these guys, it's never going to happen.
But at least they're trying, and they're
Yeah,
you're saying, they're taking one tumor out. They're
Yeah.
not going to be able to take
Right.
all of them, but they're taking one out.
Right, because if you use the cancer, analogy, eventually we're going to find a cure to cancer, right? So if we can remove as much cancer as possible, that gives the patient, longevity to give them time for us to find a cure, so that we can deliver a pill or an injection and the cancer goes away.
Yeah.
The pill for the U.S. now is some combination of massive productivity gains that would come from AI. But really, it would be like nuclear fusion, right? It would be free energy. And we're making progress on that. Now, I don't think that's happening in the next year or 5, but, it may happen in the next 10 to 15 years. And if we can really reduce the overall cost of energy to basically nothing, that's just not the goal of fusion, then we have time. That's worth getting some time. So if we can buy that time by reducing some debt now and then have to go and inflate it, that just, gives us a little bit more time till we get to that productivity miracle. But pain tolerance is key. And only Trump really knows how much he's willing to tolerate at this point.
That's an interesting take.
Recently we saw with Argentina, Javier Milei and the significant cuts that were made, with his government. It's very similar to what we're experiencing here now. Do you see any parallels there? There was a drop in GDP initially, but the economy has since recovered, and of course, there's going to be that short term pain. But what I think is a downside for a 4-year cycle here is that that's really not enough time for these policies to play out. And if a new administration comes in and undoes all that, then we're continuously repeating that cycle. So, do you have any ideas as to how we might implement, legislate some of these policies or adopt a new standard or mimic what Javier has done without, having this political tension that we're seeing, just focusing on the economic underlying, the macro perspective of that.
No, there's certainly some similarities here, but look, I mean, Argentina has had to go through a pretty sizable contraction during this, and it's not clear to me that the pain tolerance of the average American citizen would be willing to necessarily go through that level of slowdown that would be necessary in order to really right size things. So, yeah, look, I think there's a fear that, to your point, Paul, the next administration may change the rules. Though there's a fear that it will never be a next administration, right? That the Republicans or Trump will go down some sort of fascist, anti-democratic state of play that makes it impossible for another party to take power, right? I think that there is a fear from the left that is happening, that we are moving in that direction with all the executive orders and kind of not following the appropriations of what the Congress says you should spend. Trump's like, yeah, we're not going to spend money on that. And he's doing things that are moving him maybe toward, more on the scale towards authoritarian than not. And there'd be a fear that we would move kind of further and further along that pathway. Hopefully we don't, but it's possible we might. But look, I think we need to take some of these hard medicine, these hard pills, right? We have to right the wrongs of the fiat debasement that we've had for way too long. I mean, the budget was balanced. There was not a lot of debt back in 1999. So we're talking about 25 years. That obviously was accelerated after 9/11 and the Iraq War and Afghanistan and all the military stuff. And it has to end, and we kind of, maybe we can't go back to that environment so rapidly, but I think we could set ourselves up on a pathway towards, more sustainable private sector growth, driven by investment and real wealth creation, not this paper, wealth society that we've built where, folks closest to the money printer make the most money. So I've seen some ridiculous stats about how much wealth is tied up in and around DC that nothing gets made there,
No.
right? And and look, we're seeing it in the property values, right? In DC are plummeting finally, right? And layoffs and unemployment is moving higher in the area, and so I mean that's a good thing.
That's a fascinating point. How the left is genuinely looking at it from that perspective, thinking that there may not be another chance for them to get into that, get back into office. But I think it's, um, I wouldn't give that much. I think they're accusing us of their sins, right? What they were doing was actually undermining the, democratic process by flooding
Yeah.
illegal immigrants into our country and giving them the
Yeah.
fast track to vote, right? And that was such a corrupt way of going about establishing political dominance that these executive orders don't even compare. And executive orders can be undone, right? If they do get into office, those can be undone unless they're cemented through
That-
legislation.
That's a good point, Paul. Because if you really think about what the Democrats were, trying to do, and if they would have won this election, there never would have been another Republican president ever, because every city, every swing state would have been ambushed with all these people that were illegally immigrated in that could now vote. So how could a Republican? Because why would somebody that came over here that's allowed to vote for the party that wants them out? And that was like, I think that was the wake up moment when Elon Musk had, when he's like, look, if we play this out on a longer time frame, if this actually happens, America as we know it is like, the cancer's already it's taken over. It's stage 17. We're done. So it's an very, very interesting perspective. But I'm on the belief that we need to fix the money.
Yeah.
Like, would we have been in this predicament right now if we never would have got off a gold standard?
Yeah, look, I mean, there is no discipline agent on the spending, right? The gold standard used to discipline countries' abilities to spend more than they take in. Because if you lost your gold reserves, there'd be a flight of capital out of your country. Your currency then would weaken. That would help improve your competitive position, and you can rebalance in that way. When we lost that standard, then there is no, and we are the reserve currency issuer. The discipline agent on government spending would be the bond market, right? And that's what you have in emerging markets often, is when emerging market countries who can't really print their own money to buy things get out of whack, bond markets sell off, interest rates go high, currency gets weakened, government gets overthrown, they announce an austerity measure, they figure it out, and look, Argentina's been through this several times. Various this is the story of emerging markets, forever. And so the bond market acts as a discipline agent. In America, the bond market can't or hasn't acted as a discipline agent because the Federal Reserve comes in constantly and prevents that from happening. Anytime there's treasury market dysfunction, the Fed comes in and creates another facility, prints more money, does quantitative easing, does whatever it takes to keep the overall borrowing costs of the U.S. down. And you know what? Congress figured this out. They figured out that no matter what we do, no matter what the deficits look like, the Fed's always just going to be there to bail us out.
Yep.
They're never going to let interest rates really move to clear at a point where we run into trouble. And so with that mindset, we've racked up $36 trillion in debt and $2 trillion a year in deficits. And we're still fighting now in this budget process to cut it all. I mean, it's really, and these are even Republicans, right? It's, that there's a segment of the Republican Party that wants to do really, really stringent cutting right now. Thomas Massey at the foreground of that, who actually has voted against, this budget resolution. He's the only vote for a plan that's going to raise the deficit.
Yeah.
And he was the only Republican that basically voted against it. So even the Republicans themselves, who talk a big game, are
They're in
on the joke. But no, I mean, we have to figure out that, the money has been the problem, and I think if the Democrats look, I think we were eventually going to get to a point where we were going to blow this up. And I think if the Democrats remained in power, we would have kept on with this, more money printing, wealth inequality would have continued to grow wider and wider and wider. And the likelihood of a violent revolution in America of the 99% versus the 1%, I think would have been very, very high.
Very, and a lot sooner.
And a lot sooner. I think with Trump in there looking to shake it up, we still may ultimately end up in the same place.
It's not going to.
But we're at least trying a plan now to make that not happen. And it's through, an attempt to reprivatize the economy, reduce government spending, and bring down the debt and go through this pain. And because he has a mandate, given the election,
not according to Al Green,
right? But but look, as long as there's a mandate, he has some leeway to try this out, right? And I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to try to remove some of this cancer, now, as opposed to just, but look, the money printing is the problem. I don't know if we are ever going to really go back to a gold standard per se, or even a Bitcoin standard, but we do need a disciplined agent on government spending. And I think what we're seeing now, and it's to that Chamath point earlier, is as foreigners are holding less treasuries because of this excess spending, and also because of the sanctions that we've put on Russia, and Iran and other, sanctioning their reserves, it's forcing these countries to find alternative places to store their excess trade balances. And what they're doing is that, they're increasingly investing it domestically, but they're also putting it into gold. Will they eventually put it into Bitcoin? Maybe. We talk about that, but gold is reinserting itself into the monetary system again as a place to store wealth for a country that generates excess trade balances. And so as that's happening, that means that there's less foreign demand for treasuries. That's going to keep upward pressure on interest rates, which is going to make it harder for Congress to keep spending and spending and spending. So maybe there's a chance that the bond market can intervene here, but hopefully we don't get to that. We don't want to be in a situation where we have a bond crisis. That would be really bad.
Yeah.
If interest rates in the 10-year go to 6, 7, 8%, I mean, the country literally we would be bankrupt very quickly. And then they would print money to prevent that and cap rates. And then the dollar would get smashed and inflation would go to 8, 10, 12% or higher. That's not a good outcome. So we got to get moving on this now, take some pain now, and hope that this transition works out. But it might not.
I've got two interesting takes here from Scott Bessent. I'd love you guys to unpack. If you want to read this real quick, the video is 8 minutes.
So Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was questioning, we're seeing the hangover from the excess spending in the Biden 4 years, 6 to 12 months, it becomes Trump's economy. Translation, they want the market to crash soon, which is pretty much what we've been talking about on this pod so far. And then this post says, if you cut the deficit, GDP will collapse. And there's a chart.
Sorry, there's a top part. So he was saying the real U.S. economy, the private sector has been weak under the surface, barely moving for years, essentially being strangled by overregulation and that sort of thing. If you could unpack this chart, is it possible that we are experiencing the ripple effect of the previous administration, and the policies from the Trump administration might first, be felt within 6 to 12 months or longer?
Yeah. Look, I think this is accurate. The government largesse and regulation has stymied private sector development. The deficits have been a problem. They've been inflationary. And so we need to, root this out of the economy. In order to do that, and we need to do it sooner. We need to do it now. Because if we do it now, we want to keep as far away from the midterms as possible, right? Because Republicans want to stay in power. And we don't want to be dealing with a slowing economy.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Or inflation in the summer of 2026, because, like I said, then they will be thrown. The Republicans will lose the House in a large way, and then Trump will be impeached again. And so that is not that's a bad outcome. So if we root this out now, we blame the prior administration, we blame Biden, we blame Janet Yellen for the way she financed the debt and didn't term the debt out and only financed the debt with short-term borrowings, which is what emerging markets do, which are highly interest rate sensitive. And we can blame them for this, and we have a mandate to do it. Right? People are supporting this because you could see it in the Doge approval ratings. Right? People are saying, yeah, we want to root the government spending problem out. So let's get it out of the way now. And by the time and that's at the same time, let's pass tax cuts, let's pass supply side reform, let's pass deregulation, let's do all these pro business things which take time to filter through the economy, so that by the fourth quarter of this year, you know, those capex investments from Apple and Honda and all these companies, they're starting to they're shovel ready, they're starting to hit the ground. All these things take time. Trump's going to cut down the permitting, right? He's basically saying, you build it, well, 10 days we'll get you approval, right? Well, you're going to cut all this garbage red tape that's been built up for decades. And so by the fourth quarter of this year, we're humming again, and we're growing the real economy north of 3% next year. And then Republicans steamroll Democrats because they have no agenda. They have nothing. You know, the economy is great at that point, and everyone's, you know, and folks are getting employed in these construction jobs, either higher paying jobs now, and, you know, economy looks good. And we that's the plan. Is it going to work that perfectly? Probably not, but that's at least the plan. And you need to get that slowdown out of the way now, because it is still the Biden economy right now. Yeah, it's going to take a couple quarters for any. Look, there's no budget, right? We don't even have a budget right now. So the budget we're operating under is the Biden budget. And if they pass a continuing resolution, which is most likely what they're going to do, the budget lasts. It's still the Biden budget for the next 6 months. So the Trump policies really don't come into play until the end of this year at the earliest. Now, sentiment, consumer sentiment, business sentiment doesn't work the same way, right? Businesses are investing or not investing based on what they view the forward outlook of the administration to look like. And right now, as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of uncertainty. But once that uncertainty dries up, I think businesses are going to spend. I think they are encouraged by this agenda, this deregulation. There is money to be spent. They see an opportunity to take market share away from foreign companies that have been flooding our markets with cheap goods in a lot of areas, and the tariffs will protect that. So I think money and investment will happen, but we got to get to that point first.
Yeah, you can't just exactly, like you don't become president and the next day everything is just like it wasn't happening right before. And that's like, I think that goes to like a deeper problem, like our entire like government system, how we have a 4-year window, like 2-year midterms, like what can actually get done in that kind of system. And it's continues to like, oh, by the time stuff's starting to change, now I got to run for reelection.
Yeah, we're constantly running for, reelection. I mean, and all the money that's in politics, and just having to fundraise constantly every 2 years if you're in the House. I mean, and look, the margin of victory right now in the House is, less than 5 votes. I think Republicans pick up a couple of votes with some of these special elections that are coming up, but still 5 votes. I mean, it's nothing can get done. If you have even within the Republican Party, it's hard to find consensus. Trump had to steamroll and twist arms just to get this, this budget proposal through. I mean, looked like they weren't even going to put up a vote, and they got a vote through because Trump had to make a few phone calls and promise a few things, but that's going to be for everything. So if they lose, and then again, if they lose that majority in 2026, then the next 2 years are just going to be done. Nothing's going to get done, and then the whole MAGA agenda just goes out the window, and we probably just have a society that goes back to what it used to do, which is print money,
eat itself from within.
Exactly.
Yeah, which inevitably leads to socialism.
So last week when I was
casualties.
Last week when I was here, I haven't looked since, but the Doge website was at like 55 billion, or
Let's have a look right now.
how much more has he cut over the last week?
Live tracker.
It was at 55 billion a week ago.
Wow.
That's a good thing. You guys should do that every week. It's a good thing to keep in mind.
So we found an extra
every Wednesday. We should do that.
At $50 billion more in a week, that they found that we were just wasting America's hard-earned tax dollars. For what?
Yeah, I don't know how they're coming up with all these calculations. They're probably not annual. They're probably over, but still, the numbers are large and they're growing, and it's concerning that there has been that much grift and fraud and abuse of the budget process for so long. And people who have benefited from it are threatened by it. Right, their whole existence in lobbying has been to procure more funds for their clients, and now someone is going in there with a red pen and saying, I know you want to talk about these credit cards, but I don't even know what this is, but what is it, 146,000 credit cards that are unlimited fun, like that we needed to deactivate them because people are just spending money with reckless abandon. I mean, it's kind of wild.
It's so funny. They apparently just put a $1 spend limit on those credit cards because here's the tweet. I'll pull it up.
It says breaking. When a federal judge blocked Trump's attempt to terminate government credit cards, Doge spent a spending limit of $1 on the cards.
Apparently, Elon said that they were spending roughly $10,000. That was the limit previously, and that they were spending. Where's the statistic? I had it pulled up.
So it sounds like they were just spending boatloads of bullshit on bullshit at the end of the day.
Pretty much.
I will say one thing. One thing back to State of the Union that actually annoyed me last night. Trump made reference to these statistics about the Social Security numbers and the amount of people that are as old as he said they were, and this has been completely disproven. The Social Security is not sending money to anybody that is 200 years old, or I mean, it's so. I think
that was more of just like
I know, but I think it would be better
if he didn't do
if he just didn't do that shit, and it's just like I don't. It's just he doesn't need to. So, all the other things were completely legitimate things, but to come and say, well, we're spending money giving checks to people who are, how many people are between the ages of 140 and 149? It's like we don't need it, because it discredits. So the better job that they're doing on the other stuff, I think.
Yeah, it's a good criticism, in the sense that there wasn't spending from Social Security going towards them. But Elon had brought up a point that there was claims being made with regards to Medicare and Medicaid for those Social Security numbers. So although there wasn't Social Security funding going towards them, there was still backdoor fraud occurring with regards to those actual security numbers. So I can pull up the clip on Rogan where he talks about this, just give it some nuance.
Yeah. But look, I think there's,
it was funny to listen to.
It was
like, and that
but I think it was infuriating to people on the other side to have to listen to that, because every time it sounded like every time he said an age range, right? So again, it's just he loves those moments. He knows he knows how to rub people the wrong way. He knows how to scratch the itch. He knows how to needle them, and he does it better than anybody, I suppose. But for average Americans who are just looking to kind of get above the bullshit,
like people that are watching the actual media, I can't say the news channels that are on TV still, that doesn't help.
Yeah,
because they're gonna be able to run with that, and they're gonna be able to clip that exact thing and say this isn't true. He's lying. Right. It's like, well, let's be real. No one actually thought like someone like it just he fabricated a little bit, even though like most people knew it was like
And look, his mandate is not really as big as he says it is, right? I mean, it's whatever the numbers were, 80 million votes out of 330 million Americans. I mean, it's not a majority, right? I mean, so it'd be better if he was trying to signal to folks on the left about how these policies are going to help him and help them, and I think he could do a better job on that. He may never be able to convince the Democrats in the Congress that they are, but he can do a better job, I think, signaling to Democratic working Americans. Maybe it's the the Bernie supporters, the working class, the union people, about how the short-term pain for long-term gain strategy actually does benefit them over time.
I found this clip. I'll play it for you real quick, just where Rogan and Elon discuss this actual Social Security fraud issue.
Doesn't mean your tax dollar should pay for this bullshit.
Yes. I mean, we found just with a basic search of the Social Security database that there were 20 million dead people marked as alive.
But were they getting money?
Some of them are getting money.
What percentage of them?
It isn't clear. We're actually trying to run this through. I was trying to get an answer right before the show. What it looks like is that most of the fraud is not coming from Social Security payments directly, but because they're marked as alive in the Social Security database, that they can get disability, unemployment, sort of fake medical payments, and other things because they're marked as alive in the Social Security database.
Mm.
So it looks like it's a bank. The fraud is a bank shot essentially. They bank shot into Social Security. They just do an "Are you alive?" check, and then get fraudulent payments from every other part of the government.
These antiquated systems that we have, I mean, it's bad.
What's wild
Right.
about it is that it's not as bad here in the U.S. as it is around the rest of the world, because that stuff happens all over the world.
Yeah. It's just one of those things because we are like the biggest power and it's happening like to us and we don't even understand the full grift yet. Like, because this is still only a few weeks in the making. So how deep does this go? Right? It's like, yeah, we might not know everything yet. And it might be just as bad as everywhere else because we're just now starting to uncover it. There, it's just already uncovered. It's just, it's interesting.
Yeah. And on that podcast, they also talked about how apparently the Fed was cutting checks to some NGO and multiple other agencies without even requiring a name or a line item description for what the money is being issued for. Right. So Elon said those, essentially said going forward, we're going to, require a description and a name. And that reduced, that to like 2%, just slashed it because nobody wants to be associated to fraud. But here's a funny, more sad tweet from Vivek where apparently, if you want to read it, Nick,
Yeah.
go for it.
Vivek Ramaswamy tweeted, "Rules for thee, not for me. Thousands of IRS employees and contractors literally aren't paying their own taxes," said Senator John Ernst. They were audited the IRS and found they owed nearly $50 million. The government-wide number of employee unpaid taxes is over $1.5 billion. The hypocrisy is insane. So the federal employees aren't even paying taxes on the income. In other news, what are your thoughts on the gold card?
So I think it's interesting.
I had a fight with my girlfriend about this.
I think that selling citizenship in America to highly qualified individuals does make some sense. Other countries do it.
We do it currently in a
and-
different way.
Yeah. And I do wonder, though, that there are as many people out there that actually have 5 million. Because right now you can already do this. If you're rich, you can already buy your citizenship here. So, but I think what's going to wind up happening is they're going to wind up selling these gold cards to companies, and they're going to say, and then companies are going to have access to, and maybe it won't be $5 million a person in the end. Maybe it'll be $500,000 a person. Like for a gold card, you can hire 10 people at $5 million.
Are you familiar with the current plan at all, or no?
I know you can invest. I don't know if it's $1 million, and you have to hire some people or do something.
So my girlfriend sent me something on some sort of social media, and I never really looked into it. I was like, all right, whatever. So I started looking into it. She's like, Trump did, blah blah blah. I'm like, all right. So what is the gold card? What is it replacing? Do we already do that? So it's like this. I think it's called like the EB something program.
Yeah, the EB5
program, and they have to spend $800,000 to $100,000 to invest in an American business, and they have to hire 10 employees. So that sounds good, but being that it's the government, do you think there's corruption?
Surely.
Of course. These people aren't doing it. They're taking advantage of the system, and they're making bullshit jobs, they're fabricating everything. It's not being checked.
Yeah.
So but they're still getting their citizenship for much less
Right.
than the 5 million. So like that program, and it would, if it worked how it was written,
Yeah.
be great, but it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's I think where it could be interesting is I think that what they're saying is there's like 250,000 people on this EB1 list, which is like highly qualified, skilled person trying to get into the country, but can't because we can't process them quick enough or whatever the laws are, the immigration laws are. And so the thought is, well, if we could charge, each of those people $5 million each, we'd raise $1 trillion. 200,000 people at $5 million each, it's $1 trillion, and we could pay down debt with that. Now, those 200,000 people don't all have access to $5 million. Clearly, some of these are like college kids, that exchange students from China who are studying at Harvard, who are geniuses, or India geniuses who want to stay here and work here to work for Google or whatever, and they can't because they can't get a visa. So they go home, they work for the India, they work whatever. And so the idea is that they're getting educated here. Let's keep them here and let's let them buy their citizenship, basically. But those college kids don't have $5 million to do that. But maybe Google does. And so Google can buy the gold. I think this is how it's happening. Is like I said, Google will buy the gold card, and they'll be able to spend $5 million tax deductible, and or whatever, and they can get 10 people off the list or 20, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
And so look, is it a way to bring highly qualified people here and cut out the red tape, and that's good for American companies and good for American business, and actually becomes a revenue generator for the U.S. government? Sounds pretty good. I mean, Portugal does it. Other countries do it in a proper way and incentivizes the brightest people to kind of live in this country. And if you supplement that with a tariff regime, right, where these employees may say, look, I want to work in America for companies that are going to thrive in America, and I think there's a virtuous cycle component to it. So I think it's a reasonable idea.
I think it is also. I didn't have any like context at all until I started looking into it, and I was like, oh, it's not like it's a new concept. We're already doing something.
Yeah.
It's just what we're doing is working, and it's been being taken advantage of for so long. And the people that are supposedly doing the old program, like, it's not being audited. Like, there's just a bunch of people in limbo, not knowing if they're going to get approved, if they're not going to get approved, and if they're not approved, they're still here. So it really hasn't been benefiting America. So this is just a way. Again, there's not that many people that just have $5 million walking around. So the people that do have that money, they're not like, that's the whole point, I think. Like, you want them, like, you don't want it to be for anyone. You want it to be for certain, like, high people that either they can invest it or someone wants to invest their money in it. So it's like, that's like kind of like the whole point.
Yeah.
Look, and there's just an interesting caveat over apparently the current system requires that they pay taxes in the U.S. and in their country of origin. So this new one would eliminate that, and
They wouldn't pay taxes on the money they'd make outside of America.
correct.
But if they move here, though, you don't think, like, in general, if they have citizenship here, they're going to spend money here. They're going to invest here. They're not just going to spend $5 million just to be here.
Correct. It seems like worldwide taxation for U.S. citizens is is a travesty. But yeah, please carry on, Greg.
No, what I was going to say just broadly is, what I think these guys led by Elon are trying to do is they're saying it's possible to run the government like a business. And it should be expected, and that is what actually the voters want. They don't just want government. They want an efficient government. They don't want too much government. And
It's too much of anything. You get to a point where Elon Musk knows this better than anybody. Like, he was talking about his rockets and like how long it takes for them just to approve like a rocket launch. It's like, it takes me 10 years just to get this approved. It's like, how is anything supposed to get done when there's so many different like organizations that have to ask for permission here? It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, in the year of 2025, we should be able to streamline the government in a much more efficient way. And it's a shame that we haven't been doing it up to this point. But Trump said the buck stops here. Like, we're doing it, and Elon is the best person to do it. And I don't know. There's a lot of criticism again from the left about what his intentions are, or he bought the election. I mean, look, the truth of the matter is the Tesla stock price has gotten absolutely murdered over the course of the last 3 months. He's actually worth less now than he was before the administration. This guy does not need money, right? He has altruistic intentions here. He sees
Altruistic and autistic.
yes, both of them. He sees that this can't exist forever. I mean, this is a guy who's trying to populate Mars because he's concerned about the planet. I mean, he's obviously concerned about what happens to America if we continue on this path. I mean, and as a billionaire, he's probably thinking, I really don't want pitchforks coming to wherever I decide to live. Although he doesn't own any homes, so I don't exactly know where he lives. He lives on the Trump's couch now, whatever. But
he's already living on Mars, bro.
yeah, but look, I think he's trying. I don't necessarily believe this about the rest of the billionaires that maybe have attached themselves to the Trump train, but I do think Elon is one of a kind in this regard. I mean, and he is trying to actually, I mean, we talked to with Dominic a couple weeks ago, and he referred to him as one of like Aristotle's magnificent men. I mean, he really does appear to be that way, and he's trying to change the course of history through these actions by first helping to get Trump elected, and now really engineering a restructuring of the U.S. government, and hopefully helping put America back on a winning path. And he will be remembered in history, not only for his business endeavors, but also for this, for helping out. And he doesn't need that. Like Trump said last night, and it said before, he doesn't need this shit.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to be doing
neither
this.
does Trump.
And Trump may need it a little bit more than Elon.
But he doesn't need
But-
it from there's no.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
doesn't need it from a financial
Yes,
standpoint.
yeah. But and that's true. And he's doing it because it's the right thing to do. And he's in a position that he can actually make it happen.
Yeah.
So if he wants to walk around the White House in a t-shirt and a hat and put his kid on his head, I mean, the guy's working more than anybody else anywhere. So I don't.
At the end of the day, like the Democrat Party made Elon. Elon was a Democrat.
Yeah.
They made his. Didn't his child like transition or like because of all these woke policies in terms of like the transgender ideology? Like they did, and then they kicked him out of California. Or he left California because of it. Like this guy was like a Democrat, and you guys loved him, and then all of a sudden, what changed? Like the Democrat Party. It's insane. And then the other thing that he was talking about on the Rogan podcast was the whole spaceship thing with the people that are stuck in space. Are you familiar with this?
Mildly.
So there's people that are stuck in space, and Elon was saying we could have gotten them like a long time ago. We can do it, but they wouldn't let they wouldn't let the Biden administration stopped it, and because they didn't like they wanted to wait till after the election, or there was just a bunch. They made it political, so there's people still stuck in space that are stuck in fucking space, because of politics. Like it's insane. These are American citizens that they're trying to. It's all like it's very frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's definitely an element of revenge in Elon's, motivation against the system that, maybe has disrupted his family, maybe has, certainly has disrupted his business endeavors and with all the red tape. And so he's like, I'm getting rid of all this. But I think it's more along the lines of like, I could fix this.
Yeah.
I know what to do here. I've done this before, and I'm going to do it. And I've aligned myself with a guy who actually also wants to do it. And we're just gonna do it, and we'll break some things, and we'll make some mistakes along the way. And we're not. It's not our intent to violate to break any laws, but if there's questions, let's bring them up. And let the Supreme Court rule, and if it's good, then we'll go. If it's not good, then sorry. It's not like we're not trying to break the laws, but we're going to push the envelope here.
Yeah, I'm all for it. What's this, Paul?
So right now, End the Fed is trending. Thomas Massey and Ron Paul are, raising awareness for the cause and have been. And, I couldn't agree more. But this tweet here just gives a good visual as to what inflation has done to our purchasing power in just a few years, in a lifespan, essentially.
Yeah.
Let's say 1933 on the right.
Yeah, that's right.
And now the gold price is close to 3,000, so that's even a stale picture there.
Wow. So, go ahead.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't even realize like the ridiculousness of the Fed, like and how it even like started and how corrupt it was even from like the concept in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, and it's one of those things like how is that? Like, how is it not ended? Like,
yeah, because it serves the wealthy, it serves the banks, and it serves the protected classes, homeowners in this country, and so those interests have inordinate power, and makes it very difficult to remove that structure from the system. And look, I think that, as we talked about earlier and several times on this podcast, and really the mantra of Bitcoin in general is fix the money, fix the society type mentality. And these guys fuck with the money
Yeah.
all the time.
Yes, sir.
And I can't put it any more mildly than that.
No, they literally control
It's-
like everything because they control the money pit,
Yeah.
and they're not elected officials.
When you can borrow, when you can lend money and artificially create more money through, this fractional reserve lending, then you inevitably enslave, the nation. And we've seen throughout history that this practice, has been frowned upon again and again and again. And now we have the opportunity to fix that broken system, right? Because it's all about the incentives
I like
with
what Larry's-
separating the state, separating money from the state. And here's this cool little clip.
I love David Smith. Are you guys familiar with him?
He's the best.
He's awesome.
I love this guy.
The truth is that if the libertarian agenda were to ever be put in place, big banks would make way less money than they make right now. We're the party who wants to abolish the Federal Reserve and make sure there's never banker bailouts again, and that they don't have unlimited access to easy money. And I bet if I could borrow money at 0% interest rate and then loan it out to the public at 4%, I could do pretty good making money too. But we're trying to end that scheme. But what we can do is talk to the American people who are being ripped off by this whole system and get them excited. The truth is that if the libertarian agenda were
It's so. I mean, it's insane that it's actually going on. And it's happening. Like it is just wild. It's blasphemy. I didn't learn about the Federal Reserve till I was like late 20s. And it's like, wait, what? I went to school. I got a degree. I didn't learn any of this bullshit.
I mean, what we're seeing right now is interesting in that the reason, to the conversation earlier about crashing the markets or engineering a recession, part of the reason that they have to do this is because inflation is too high. And part of the reason that inflation is too high is the way that the Fed has acted over the course of the last several years. And they've been too slow to deal with the inflation problem. And at the moment where the markets kind of were reeling a little bit, they came in and printed more money, right? Back in 2023, Silicon Valley Bank had its issues, after the bond market sell off, and they had some mismatched duration, versus assets issues, and basically another bailout facility was created to kind of make whole all of the treasury holdings that banks had that were underwater. And so they were able to basically put that collateral to the Fed at par, even though it was worth 70 cents or less. So again, another time that the Fed came in and prevented
A cleansing.
event that would bring inflation down. And so this happens constantly, time and time again. And so now the administration is basically saying, you know what, fuck it. Like, we're going to take, the Fed hasn't been able to do this. They haven't been able to bring inflation down. This is not being discussed necessarily public, but it's the truth. This is the reality.
This is the game of chess they're playing.
This is the reality. And so now the administration is saying, we're going to take this down, the inflation. And then eventually they're going to tell, I don't know if they're going to end the Fed, but they're certainly going to make the Fed be more of or less of an independent entity. That's going to be their intent. They're using the Chevron ruling. They're going to use the Chevron ruling, which removes power from agencies as a way to try to take some power away from the Fed. They're focusing on the 10-year rate, which is where Treasury borrows, and so they're doing things to try to reduce the power of the Fed, because the Fed is incompetent. I mean, they have not been able to bring inflation. Literally, we're talking about bringing their target is 2%. We can argue why it's 2%. It doesn't matter. It's 2% inflation. We've been running above it since the end of 2021. We're not forecast to get back to it until the middle of 2027 at this point.
And
It's literally 6 years of running a policy above, because they are afraid of doing the hard work that may lead to some employment issues. And I don't know. It's a real problem. And in the meantime, they keep enriching banks, they keep enriching the wealthy, they keep enriching homeowners, which is making housing unaffordable in this country. And again, more and more people are finding themselves in the lower part of this K-shaped economy, and getting pretty pissed off about it.
I like what Larry calls it, mouse click money.
Yeah. It's true.
But it's so it's true though. It's like, what the fuck? They press boop, more money.
Yeah.
So with all that said, now we have this crypto strategic reserve. What are your thoughts on it containing more than Bitcoin? Right. David Sachs made an announcement, and Brian Armstrong now is sounding like a Bitcoin maxi.
I
So
don't. So I don't. I- I'm interested to see how it's going to play out. I don't think it's anything set in stone in terms of what's going to be in there. I think they have an idea, like, hey, just like a bill gets passed and there's a bunch of stuff in it, but then it gets passed to the next, and all of a sudden all the extra fluff gets taken out. I don't think at the end of the day all this bullshit's going to be in the reserve, and that's my hope at least. But I mean, the USA is going through its shitcoin phase right now.
Yeah.
So like, it's I went through a shitcoin phase. Most people do. It's kind of like part of the journey. But as you go down that phase, you realize the difference of what Bitcoin is compared to like the XRPs. The Bitcoin's the only one that's never been pre-mined. Like Ethereum had a 60% pre-mine, 100% pre-mine for XRP. Like these are not anywhere in the same ballpark. These are legit businesses that have a shit. Like it's not the same. But
Think that Ethereum shouldn't go into the reserve?
no,
Okay.
no,
Well,
it should be. I personally think it should be Bitcoin only because
what about for like real world assets and applications that Ethereum allows possible? Like, because essentially, if we create a new asset class, a digitized asset class, I mean, that can open the door for a lot of new opportunities as well.
what do you mean?
Tokenizing real world assets, like actually having them on ledger, uh, having the ability to trade them at an instant from one hand to another.
Yeah, so I look at it as Bitcoin is like the best form of money.
Sure. I agree.
And I don't think Ethereum is anywhere near that. And what I don't see the benefit of holding something in a reserve that like has someone is in control of. Like, remember the hack that just happened, like Bybit, whatever, like a week or two ago,
Right.
and they were talking about like, hey, should we roll the chain back? Like, no, we don't need something like that in a reserve where there's actually someone that can control like the actual product. I don't. Why would American want that?
Well, to keep the bad out.
That is the bad.
What's that?
Ethereum, XRP, these are all arbitrages on the trend.
Sure, but I mean, when it comes to like stopping something that the world doesn't want to happen, preventing it, because essentially at the end of the day, we live in a world where there are rules and regulations. We can't just live in a free world where anything's possible. I think there has to be, you know, rules and regulations in order for things to happen, and that way a certain group of people or person can't come in and control the whole thing. It can be regulated in some sort of a way because there is regulation that is needed.
Yeah, regulation, I agree. Putting Ethereum or XRP or any of these other shit in a reserve is not the same as regulation to me. That's my 2 cents. I'm curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, I mean, look, the U.S. government doesn't own stakes in public equities. I mean, I agree. I mean, there's so many things that the U.S. government can invest in. Why don't they own Apple shares? Why don't they own Google shares? I mean, they could invest in any of these things, and they don't for a variety of reasons. I think Ethereum is could be an interesting application, but there's no reason that the U.S. government needs to have a stake in it. I don't know why they went down this path with this announcement.
Well, it's all the people.
I just think I just think again, like Trump is such a sucker for like the latest story. And it's once you get him in a room, he thinks everything is interesting, and he just wants to make deals. And so he's, some donors or whoever are got his ear. And I think, and look, I kind of blame, and I don't really know David Sachs at all, but I don't know him personally, and I don't really know much about him at all. But I think it's bad advice. I think we need to encourage the creation of the crypto industry and from a rules and regulations point of view, as you mentioned, but. The reserve is different, and putting the government's money, the citizens' money to work. I just think in some of the, like you said, some of these shit coins, it just defeats the purpose. And I think what we tried to create with Trump and with RFK from the Bitcoin conference back in Nashville, and that momentum that we had, which was kind of Bitcoin only, it made you believe that Trump was kind of understood it.
Well, his kids are shitcoiners.
No, I know.
100%.
So RFK, I believe actually does understand it, and the thought was that Trump gets it too, but he doesn't get it. And you're right, his kids are shitcoiners, and it just defeats the purpose. I think it diluted the announcement. Clearly, we don't need this. And look, as far as the sovereign wealth fund or strategic reserve, I mean. I think these are interesting concepts, interesting things that are tools in the toolkit. But you know, where's the money going to come from? How are we going to fund it?
we can't afford to buy it.
Right. So I don't know exactly
Curious.
how this is going to be created. Are we going to borrow? We can do the sailor playbook and borrow fiat to buy Bitcoin. I mean, maybe we are, but and try to harden the currency. But look, Bitcoin also creates owning Bitcoin and moving towards more of a Bitcoin standard or whatever will create levels of discipline also on government, which I think you and I believe is good. But does the government think that that's actually good? I'm not sure. And I think that like you said earlier, America needs Bitcoin. Bitcoin does not need America. And I think there will eventually be and it's probably already happening. There are Bitcoin maximalists who are like, we don't need this nonsense, right? We don't need America. We don't need sovereigns in the mix here. Yeah, it's nice to have another source of demand, but this was not the intent of.
It's inevitable,
of
but it's not the
Right.
intent.
But I think as somebody who lives in America and who wants America to thrive and America to succeed and achieve and kind of continue to be great and be a great place to live and raise children, America needs Bitcoin. And so figuring out a way to get it onto the balance sheet so it hardens the money, I think is a good thing. I don't exactly know how they're going to fund it. I don't think selling the gold reserves to buy Bitcoin is a smart idea. I don't really think
even.
Right. I don't think leveraging up and selling debt to do so. Look, at minimum, they've confiscated some Bitcoin from folks. Let's keep that, right? Maybe let's figure out a way to encourage mining, and maybe the government mines Bitcoin and earns Bitcoin that way. Maybe there's other things that the government can do in order to grow its holding of Bitcoin, but I'm really not sure how they're going to fund this, and I am concerned about printing money to do it. There's also been talk about from the sovereign wealth fund and
one of those weird things being like, I want them to do it, but I don't.
Right.
Because like it pumps my bags, but it hurts everyone that I know that doesn't have any bag to begin with. So it's again, we can't afford to buy it.
Right.
So if we print more money to buy it, I mean, again, they're just printing more money. We're going more in debt.
Yep.
Now the hope would be is that as Bitcoin appreciates, then that gets worth more than but it's still just leveraging up.
Yeah. And tomorrow or Friday, there's going to be some conference and some announcement, and Sailor's there, and David's there, and a ton of smart folks are there, and I hopefully they're going to come up with some plan or something, but I don't know. I also don't. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it.
I just can't. I personally, I can't group these fucking things within the same sentence as Bitcoin. They're not even like they're.
No, when I saw that headline, I was like, "Are you serious? We're talking about." Like the first tweet came out, Bitcoin wasn't even mentioned. He had to be reminded to put Bitcoin in there. He's like, and obviously Bitcoin, that was his second tweet. It's like Cardano. I mean, XRP? These are centralized ledgers, right? These are, maybe these are things that
they're
help.
They're applications.
They're applications, right? I mean, they're going to help. Maybe they're going to help with stablecoin issuance, and they're going to help, democratize the dollar and treasuries globally to keep the dollar as a world currency, but. As a reserve asset, give me a break.
So when I hear something being put into the federal as a part of the Federal Reserve, what I'm thinking is clarity and regulation. Like, so I'm a bit ignorant when it comes to like the Federal Reserve. What exactly does it mean to have anything?
So you're talking about the strategic Bitcoin reserve, or the Federal Reserve, like the
strategic,
crypto reserve.
Basically, like how Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy has Bitcoin on its balance sheet,
right?
Basically, a balance sheet for America.
But what does that do for the country, for the individual? Like, what benefits does it have?
So we've been talking about the dollar for like a lot of this podcast. Like right now, the dollar is backed by absolutely nothing. We're in shit ton of debt. Like we don't have any hard assets. So it's like, hey, we own this Bitcoin. So let's say say we have 1 million Bitcoin and Bitcoin goes to $1 million. How much does America have in Bitcoin now? So the debt does not look as big because we have assets that are like, we don't have that's not a liability on your balance sheet. That's an asset.
So what else? What are other examples of things that are on strategic reserves?
I mean, so like like Norway has a strategic reserve, and it's funded by oil sales.
Well, U.S. in particular.
The U.S. doesn't have a reserve.
At all?
No, we don't have a strategic. We don't have Alaska. Alaska has a strategic reserve, similarly funded with oil revenues, and they take that money and they invest it and they distribute dividends to Alaskan citizens. So they give money back as like profits from oil sales. But the U.S. government itself does not have a reserve. But like Saudi Arabia has a reserve,
So it
Emirates has a reserve.
So what do we have in place of the reserve? Like, is it Fort Knox, or I mean, what do we have right now? That's like, what?
I mean, the U.S. government doesn't have excess revenues to invest on its own money. Now, obviously, the U.S. government owns land, right? The U.S. government owns the roads, the interstate. It's privatized some of those, right? There's toll roads that we've already sold, so they sold down some of that, but there's plenty more assets that the U.S. government owns that generate revenues for it. National parks, right? There's a lot of other things that they could, in theory, privatize that are assets on our balance sheet. But there's no entity now in government that basically takes in money and then invests it. This is something that I think these guys are talking about too, as far as how much R&D, like DARPA, and other technology creations or pharmaceutical creations come from government research that private sector exploits, makes money off of, and the government gets nothing for it. So I think, part of this idea may be to privatize some of that research in a way that makes the government a partner in some of these new entities. I think that would be an interesting way for the government to actually monetize the research and R&D and education that it does, and that can create money for the government to pay down debt, to buy other things.
So now, what about if so essentially, like, it would be beneficial to have like a state park that revenues money that would be considered an asset.
Yeah,
similar to the
like a national park, it's generating revenues. Those revenues get paid into the government as revenues, and then the expenses pay the people there and pay for other things that the Department of Parks or whatever the name of it. That's how they fund themselves.
Now, what if we were able to take these things and tokenize it? Because not everything I believe should be on Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin.
I think what the disconnect is I'm okay with other applications, but I'm not okay with the application that created a shit coin that has nothing to do with the application being in a strategic reserve. Because no one's saying the application isn't awesome. Right. What we're saying is we don't need the fucking shit coin that comes with the application. They're not the same.
The government doesn't need it. The government doesn't need to own it.
Well, at that point, can't you just say I mean, it doesn't have to be the blockchain itself, like the entire everything on the Ethereum. Couldn't it just be like land or like a particular asset? Like if it,
yeah, look, I think what you're describing in tokenizing land or tokenizing, I think these are interesting thoughts and ideas, and probably should be explored if they're not being explored already. I think the government itself doesn't need to hold the token as an asset. It already owns the parks. So all the thing that we'd be doing, let's say if you wanted to tokenize land in, the state park or whatever, the government already owns that. And so if they wanted to monetize, they're kind of front selling it. They're bringing in revenues and they'll use those revenues to spend money in other ways, but they already own that asset. So it's not, it doesn't find itself in some sort of strategic reserve.
Well, do you think that would kind of incentivize like the citizens to invest in these things and allow transparency to happen, where you can like see where all your dollars are going that are going to this project or to this particular thing?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I think it's again. I think the application has merit, but I think that's different from what the government is talking about and doing with this asset reserve. And again, I think. I'm not even sure that, again, we're talking about the government holding and buying asset. Basically, the government taking money and buying assets with that money. Right now, the government doesn't have money. The government is in debt and is in consistent deficit. So it would need to find a way to pay off all the debt or a portion of the debt and run a surplus. And at that point, take that excess and then buy something with it. And so the question is, how long is it going to take for us to get to that point? I mean, it's probably going to take forever. So I don't really know how they're going to fund it. The only way that I could think about funding, they're going to sell other assets that they have to put in to buy better assets, right? They're going to sell land to buy Bitcoin. And should the government be in the business of trading assets? I don't know. It doesn't really sound like a good use of the government's, resources. Now there's talk about hiring private sector people to manage this, and maybe they could do it better but it's still a government entity. Like, when would we ever said, yes, the government's going to do something efficiently? I mean, that's never happened. So I don't know. This whole thing kind of is a bizarre thing. But look, I think what it suggests to me is that the government is trying to think outside the box of ways to bring down the debt, to lower spending, to lower inflation, and they're open to everything,
Yep.
right? They're open to anything and everything in order to do it.
I think they should just do a strategic Trump NFT reserve. Nick, could you read this?
Yeah. This is from the Winklevoss Cameron. It says, a strategic Bitcoin reserve is really not a choice if you look at the game theory and national security ramifications. It's a must. Like rare earth minerals, gold, oil, etc., any country needs to stockpile these resources to increase self-sufficiency and reduce leverage to its adversaries. Stockpiling sooner rather than later and before other countries is much better in terms of the price you pay. This is really simple stuff.
So how would you? I mean, I'm just kind of curious to see like where your take is on this. But like, what if we use the other blockchains for the applications that they are good for, and then finalize the settlements on Bitcoin? Given
No
that
one's, again,
I'm just curious.
I'm okay if somebody likes the application of Ethereum, if someone likes the application of XRP. I'm not like, that's fine. If somebody wants to, oh, I love the application, cool. Does that mean that Ethereum, the token, not the application, the token that's been pre-mined, 60% of Ethereum was pre-mined, meaning it was before it was even out. So 60% of the total supply like was already there. XRP was 100%. So the application and the cryptocurrency part are not the same thing. So I'm fine with someone liking an application, but I'm not fine with putting that bullshit in a strategic reserve that we're going to hold for 20 years. And if you look at Ethereum, XRP, they're all trending towards zero to Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
So why are we
Just
going to hold a
central
loser?
figurehead. Right.
Well,
This
my thought is once you like tie assets to it and then put those on the reserve or allow those onto the reserve. Again, I don't know a whole lot about the reserve. That's why I'm asking the
Yeah,
question.
no, and those are great. But again, it's like the application like is not the same as like Bitcoin's application. You know what it is? It's the best form of money. It's
Store
the
value.
hardest money. No, it's like it is like that's it's a store of value.
Centralized network in the world, and there's no central figurehead, right? Gold doesn't have a central figurehead. That's why we don't want any centralized exchange as a national, as a strategic reserve, because it can be essentially inflated, right? There's no cap, and nation states shouldn't be exposing themselves to something that could so easily be manipulated.
I was listening to Jack Mahler's podcast from Monday, and he was saying all that tweet showed me is just who fucking got in Trump's ear, who he took, who the donors are. That's all it showed me. That's all. And I was like, yeah, I agree with that. Like XRP literally has a CEO. What happens if that CEO decides to like go down a weird path, and we hold that on the reserve? That's not like that's a risk. That's a point of like that's a risk that we're taking. We don't need to take that. There's something better. Why like use XRP, trade XRP if you want to fucking hold something that's that's trending towards zero in Bitcoin terms.
Yeah, it's so interesting with Malay, and that Libra token.
Trump did the same fucking thing. Let's be real. Like
No,
Trump,
for sure.
like Trump didn't get shit. Like he got shit from like the Bitcoin community, but he did the same thing, if not worse, than what Malay did.
Yep.
For sure. And so obviously they're making a ton of money off of this, and
Yeah, they're
biased.
shitcoiners. And they're in the shitcoin phase, and they're it is what it is. People go through this phase, and then eventually you're like, you know what? I don't want to be trading. Hopefully, I timed the market right. You know what? I'm going to hold something, have a longer time preference, and that aligns with a reserve. Like I want to hold something that it's not going to go like. Imagine XRP goes up like 1,000,000% tomorrow, but we're holding it for 20 years. Are you confident XRP is going to be around in 20 years? Like that's like it's a long-term play. It's not I need it in a minute.
Yeah, I think what Bitcoiners want to see is just the adoption take place, right? The reserve being prioritized for the most pristine collateral in the world and nothing else. And then once Bitcoin is established in that sense, then the market can adopt these other layer twos and different blockchains for different utilities. But let's not confuse hard money and different apps, essentially.
They're just arbitrages on the trend. Like Bitcoin's taken off, so people are made products that try to like improve Bitcoin and do all these other things, but it's like Bitcoin's still working. Is it the best for buying a coffee? No, but when's the last time like someone took a gold bar and bought coffee with a gold bar? Are they gonna shave the gold bar at the store? Like that's not what I need Bitcoin for. Like But can it do it? Yes. Are there going to be layer 2s built on Bitcoin? Yes. Can you put NFTs on Bitcoin? Really? Yeah. You can do all that shit. It's just, why would I want to do that with the best form of money? Like,
Right. So here's a tweet that just summarizes the essence of that. If you wouldn't mind reading it.
Yeah. The rule of crypto and life is whatever can be done will be done. If you want to build truly unstoppable tech, you must ruthlessly minimize attack surface at every turn. That's the beauty of Bitcoin. If you build in governance, don't be surprised when it's used and abused. Interesting.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Read it one more time.
I think it just, brings home everything we were just talking about. If there's any closing thoughts or any topics you want to touch on before we close, let me pull those up for you.
Yeah. No, this was, I appreciate it. But look, I think we are living in interesting times, right? And the prior 4 years were sleepy Joes, right? I mean, society did what it did. Wealth inequality got worse. Fiat money printing got worse. Americans got lazier, got fatter, unhealthier. Geopolitical tensions rose in a variety of places. America was asleep at the wheel, and the next 4 years, this administration is no longer sleeping. As a matter of fact, this administration never sleeps.
Yeah.
And I think there's a bit of a chaos theory dynamic here where you just kind of drowning the news cycle with so much going on. And sometimes it feels like disarray. And I don't know if that they have their handle on all of these things at once. I don't know if there's a cohesive message. And I don't know if they're going to be successful, but I do know that they're going to fucking try hard to make, God, I don't want to say it, but make America great again. But I mean, it's an America first
it's an
agenda. It's America. It's largely an America only agenda as well. And if you want to be part of it, you kind of have to, be part of the rules that we're setting up. And if you're a country, another country, you have to, you want to sell into America, which has the wealth. It's the wealthiest country on earth with 300 million consumers, 330 million consumers. And if you want access to, leading technology, leading military technology, leading AI technology, and, all this, and rule of law, then you got to play by our rules. And if you don't want that, and you want to go with China, who has, growing presence and probably as good AI, and look, you could go with them too, but you're not. That means you're against us, and we're going to treat you as such, and you're going to be tariffed, and you're going to be taxed.
And aren't they tariffing us?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, why are hello? Like, they're doing the same thing that we get shitted on, or Trump gets shitted on. Like, they're doing that to us, and it's insane. The rates they're sorry for cutting you off, but like,
and so that's the we're going to go through a major transition in this country, and what we're noticing is it will be televised, right? We're going to see it play out, whether it's in the Oval or on press conferences or whatever, and hopefully, I think this, as someone who I did not vote for Trump this time, but I'm willing to give them the chance because I see what they're doing. Now, I'll be critical, just like I was critical of this nonsense in the state of, I'm going to be critical, and other people should be, and other supporters should be critical. They should call out the bullshit, just as much as they called out the bullshit for Biden. When the administration does stupid things, we should call them out for it.
Yeah, you're not going to agree.
They're not above being called out on, and I do fear, because I do listen to the press conferences, and there's a lot of propaganda that Caroline Leavitt espouses, and the way that she speaks, and you could see moving in a direction if we start to, that they've kicked they want to kick the AP out of the press room. They're bringing in alternative medias, which are really only right-wing media platforms, and that's okay. But like, we got to make sure that we are calling
a
out
spade is a spade.
Exactly, and every time, what I've noticed is every time that media tries to call out something, she's very quick to say, no, you're wrong. And so if the government could just admit when they do things wrong, like even Elon, I think was very cordial when he said, yeah, we're going to make some mistakes. And that, I think people want to, that's refreshing.
That's real.
Right? That's real.
Like, it's
when they don't, and they don't admit mistakes ever. that I start to worry. If we stop calling out the bullshit, then we run the risk of moving into
What's
that
the point
authority.
of freedom of speech
right.
if you don't use it?
Right.
Like Trump's going to do things I agree with. He's going to do things I disagree with. And the next president, the one before, it's all the same. And at the end of the day, it's all about, you can't just, no one's perfect. Not our country, not other country, but you have to like never lose sight of what's the goal, who's moving it to the future that you want to see. And at the end of the day, we're in Naples and we're on the Gulf of fucking America, baby.
Yeah.
But just on that tariff discussion real quick, here's what we're being charged. Just in comparison, we charge 25%, right? And we're being charged 298% on
It's
some
wild.
things like butter and all around just much higher tariffs than we're charging. So, yeah.
Like we're not doing anything other countries aren't doing towards us. And so, again, like Craig was saying, we have the biggest economy with over 330 million Americans. If you want to sell to us, you got to pay to play. If you don't want to pay to play, you don't have to sell in your own way. Like that's there's nothing wrong. That shouldn't be a controversial take.
Absolutely. Yeah. But this whole media shift, within the press room, I think that's fascinating because it has been uncovered with this USAID spending that these media outlets were receiving that funding, and it's obviously a conflict of interest. So the way I see it is they're bringing in new media. They may have a right leaning because the right has become the platform for free speech, right? So they almost have no choice but to lean right because if they're not receiving USAID funding, they're essentially being, put out of business by mainstream propagandists and have been labeled as misinformation, disinformation. When in reality, they're just reporting. So I think what we're seeing is a correction. They're not necessarily right leaning.
They're
But
just
being
more right
labeled-
than the left.
They're being labeled as such, right? Because the right has become the party of common sense. That's where we're at today. The left, I looked at a clip today of an old leftist. They used to advocate for all the things RFK's talking about today, right? And today, well, guess what? He endorsed Trump, right? Because the left has abandoned its policies.
Yeah, they don't leave the party leaves them.
Exactly. So I think we're going to see a correction there also and have them, like think about it. Tim Pool, he's a progressive guy, right? He's labeled as a right-wing news.
Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Donald Trump, Elon Musk. These are, what they all have in common?
They were formerly
They were
Democrats.
formerly Democrats. So, like things change and the Democrat Party has changed completely from what it used to be. And they continue to change in the wrong direction. And I hope as an American in 2028, they wake up, they provide a better candidate, they actually have someone that like I would think about voting for, such as if RFK would have ran, if Tulsi Gabbard would have ran, not just, hey, Kamala's our fucking nominee. You're not voting, that's how it is. I don't want that's the most anti-American thing you can do. That's my 2 cents.
Did you guys see that Gavin Newsom clip?
You mean
the AI
no.
rendered one? It's pretty fun.
And end on that. I gotta jump out.
Sounds good. This is a guy we could actually vote for.
Who, Gavin Newsom?
The AI.
Oh, they did an AI version of it.
Welcome to the Newsom podcast. I know no one actually asked for this and they'd prefer I do my actual job instead of whatever the hell this is, but everyone knows I march to the beat of my own drum, which is why when I locked everyone down during COVID, I still went to fancy restaurants that you poor losers couldn't even afford to work at, let alone eat at. I appreciate the poor optics of another podcast hosted by a straight white male, but the world needs this now more than ever. And from what I've read online, most people don't consider me straight or a man anyhow. Have I made mistakes as governor? Not really. Actually, no. I have never made a mistake ever. I guess banging my campaign manager's wife could be viewed as a mistake, except hypergamy is a very common lifestyle in California. Oh. Some people like to say I was asleep at the wheel, which made the LA fire substantially more devastating. But again, I haven't made any mistakes. Also, aren't you amazed how little I'm using my hands while I talk? My aides told me the way I talk makes me look like a complete psychopath. So I'm doing my best to talk like a normal person right now. Plus, I'm not a psychopath, just a sociopath. Those are two very different things. Oops.
Anyways, AI, man.
That's good stuff.
Guys, it's been fun.
All right, y'all. Peace out.
Thanks very much.
See you next week.